Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told how to voice the radio, so today I'm going to be showing you Mimikyu GX. And ladies and gentlemen, there is a certain amount of finally when we talk about Mimikyu GX. Because Mimikyu had a GX. It had a psychic type GX. I did a video all about it. It was quite popular. I'll pop a link in the description. And it wasn't just released in Japan. It was good in Japan. It saw some tournament play. It saw some success in Japan. It was a good card. And because it came in a special set themed around the anime, we never actually got that set. And that makes me very, very sad indeed. I feel like we missed out. Well, the great thing is, ladies and gentlemen, we finally have our own Mimikyu GX. It's a fairy Mimikyu GX, and honestly, you should have seen it coming, because the dummy artwork we saw for the Fairy Rise booster pack shows 3 Pokemon, and long story short, I went through this in the Alolan Ninetales video a minute ago, link to that in the description as well. When they're on the dummy pack, we get GXs. It's basically an announcement. We knew we were getting a Fairy Mimikyu, and we're getting a Fairy Mimikyu. Now, the lovely David Hochmann, not only did he send me a translation for this, but he also sent me an updated picture going, hey, I know you're going to make a video about this, so I found a better quality picture. Here it is. And actually, the original picture was so low quality, it actually got a little bit mistranslated by a couple of people, but it's back now, ladies and gentlemen, and it's looking pretty good. So it is a fairy Pokemon, meaning you're hitting weakness against Ultra Necrozma and Rayquaza, both of whom are looking like they're going to be pretty good in the upcoming format. It's got a retreat cost of 1, which is very nice because it means you get free retreat with a skateboard post-rotation, which will help to soften the blow of Fairy Garden being rotated out, Boo Hiss, etc. It's got 170 HP, which is actually quite low for a basic GX. It's down there with something like Tapu Lele, but with Pokemon like Buzzwole running around with 190, honestly, we'd rather have 190. I mean, I suppose we'd rather have 470, but realistically, we'd rather have 190. And even though it's a fairy Pokemon, weakness and resistance is treating it like a ghost Pokemon. No weakness, no resistance. We've seen this on Spiritomb cards in the past. We've seen it on Sableye cards. It's unusual, and Pokemon are doing more and more of this lately. We saw it on Celesteela GX that had metal typing but the weakness and resistance of flying, where it has 2 types, one which is in the trading card game, one that isn't. It's typed in the trading card game, but it has weakness and resistance like the other type that isn't actually in the game. So, all that aside, what does it actually do? Well, according to the lovely David Hochmann, the first attack for 1 fairy energy, confusion. 1 fairy energy, you confuse the defending Pokemon. Now, on the one hand, it's a single energy on a basic Pokemon, making it a very easy attack to get using. On the first turn, you're allowed to attack. Second if you go first, first if you go second. But on the other hand, you're not doing any damage. Now, confusion alone is pretty good. You confuse something like a Buzzwole and all of a sudden you got a 2 retreat cost Pokemon that's got a flipper heads to attack, flip tails, and they don't attack, they just do 30 to themselves. On the other hand, Espeon for a single energy does 30 damage plus confusion. Xurkitree for a single energy does 20 damage plus confusion. There are plenty of Pokemon out there that for a single energy will do confusion plus a bit of damage, making this underwhelming. The good news is this could actually help with Ace Roller, because of course if you do damage and confuse, your opponent can pick him up with Ace Roller, put a new Pokemon active. With Floatstone rotating out, if you get a Pokemon which has a retreat cost of more than 1, i.e. they can't use a skateboard, and then you confuse them and they can't use Ace Roller, maybe you can trap them in the active with this, but it's not a great attack. The main attack, however, I like a lot, and it's clearly the best thing about this card. 1 fairy, 1 colourless energy, 10 damage, plus 30 damage for each damage counter on the defending Pokemon. And ladies and gentlemen, this will add up very, very quickly indeed. Now, initially it was translated exactly like Wobbuffet, 10 damage plus 10 for each damage counter on the defending Pokemon, and this was pretty good. Now, don't get me wrong, Wobbuffet also saw play because of the ability, okay, but I tell you what, it was still a decent attack that saw a bit of use. Mimikyu here, you get to do 10 damage plus 30 for each damage counter on them, and this will add up very, very quickly. If they've got 3 damage counters on them, you're doing 100 damage for 2 energy. If they've got 5 damage counters on them, then all of a sudden you're doing 160 for 2 energy, and bearing in mind, they've already got 5 damage counters on, so you're up to 210, and something like a Zoroark will go down in, well, what is essentially a single hit here. Put simply, it doesn't do much if they don't have many damage counters on them. But if you can get a bunch of damage counters on the defending Pokemon, this attack will get up to very, very, very good damage very, very, very quickly. And there are some ways of doing this. Now, maybe it's a little clunky because of the fairy energy, but in a Greninja GX deck, this could work beautifully. Frogadier, you evolve up into, drop 2 damage counters. Greninja GX, you evolve up into, you drop 3 damage counters. There's your 5 damage counters, you do 160. They've got 210 in total. And okay, maybe you're against something like a Gardevoir, for instance, that has more than that. But remember, you could always add a choice band on here, and then you're up to 190, plus the 50 already on them is 240. That's a lot of damage. Maybe you don't want to play it with Greninja, that's alright. You can use Tapu Koko, double colourless energy, 20 damage to all of the defending Pokemon. If you can do a couple turns of this, you can put all of your Pokemon into lovely range with Mimikyu here. I think if a Pokemon's got 4 damage counters on, then you're doing 130, which is pretty nice. Then, of course, you add a choice band, there's 160, plus the 4 damage counters on them already is 200, and you've got stuff like Sylveon, you've got stuff like Lycanroc here, that are going down to that amount of damage. Or maybe, instead of that, you use the Latios from Shining Legends, which for a double colourless energy does 30 to the active, 30 to one of your opponent's bench. And then after 2 hits, okay, it's only 2 Pokemon, not all of them, but then they're up to 6 damage counters, which means you're hitting for 190, plus the 6 on them is 250. Even something like a Big Bag Metagross here will go down to that kind of damage, and that's the point of this attack. Just like with Wobbuffet initially, it's not ideal because you've got to get the damage on there in the first place. But as soon as you get the damage on there, this adds up very, 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 very quickly, ladies and gentlemen. And it doesn't have to be some kind of dedicated spread deck like Greninja or Latios. It could just be something as simple as using a Tapu Bulu with a choice band to do 6 damage counters. And then bringing in Mimikyu. Okay, it's a grass Pokemon, so maybe not the best example, but you could do any amount of damage with any Pokemon. You could use a Dedenne to do 60 damage, for instance. And then in comes this, and you are off and rolling. It's slightly awkward that it's 2 energy. Of course, the old Wobbuffet had to mention Valley, which helped a lot. But you know what here? You've got Counter Game, which reduces the attack cost by 1 if you're behind on prizes. Or you can pop it into a Gardevoir deck. Remember, Gardevoir allows you to attach an extra fairy energy per turn. This is a basic Pokemon, so it would fit in there nicely. It doesn't have the same metal weakness that Gardevoir has, so it instantly becomes a great tech in Gardevoir decks. Maybe Gardevoir's got 1 energy in a choice band and hits for 60, and then Mimikyu comes in and cleans up and has no weakness. And I know we talked about it having slightly low HP earlier, but it really does bear repeating. It has no weakness. Even if you don't have a way to accelerate energy here, it is a shame that Max Elixir rotated, but it did, so stop crying. It's still only 2 energy. And then we get to the GX attack here. The GX attack says, Choose one of your opponent's bench Pokemon, shuffle that Pokemon and all cards attached to it into their deck. It's kind of like Tapu Finney's attack, except it's got to be one of their bench rather than their active, and according to David's translation here, which I trust 100%, you cannot do this to the active, you'd have to use Tapu Lele, it's got to be to one of the bench. It's kind of like Sylveon, except Sylveon is 2 bench Pokemon to the hand, rather than 1 bench Pokemon to the deck, and arguably putting one in the deck is worse, because they can't just play it back down. They haven't got the choice band and the energy and all of that still in hand ready to go. It's not an amazing GX attack if I'm being completely honest with you. What it is a nice GX attack that'll help you out occasionally. There will be games where your opponent uses a Kiawe to get a 4 energy Ho-Oh onto the bench. And just like I said about the first attack, this is basic Pokemon 1 energy. So if your opponent uses a Kiawe to get a 4 energy Ho-Oh, you can just go, oh, and use a GX attack to get rid of it. Sometimes your opponent will have 1 good attacker, and this will buy you a couple of turns by getting rid of it. It's not the best GX attack ever, and you're probably not going to play this for the GX attack. And the main attack doesn't do much damage on its own. But in so many decks, this is great. Pop it in Gardevoir. Gardevoir does a bit of damage. In comes Mimikyu to clean up with no weakness. Or you just play it with counter gain and 1 or 2 energy, or even just play like a rainbow energy. And all of a sudden you can clean up using this in other decks. I like the GX attack. I like the main attack a lot, but only in certain decks. You got to use it properly. I'm not a fan of the first attack, if I'm honest, but I still think this is a 4-Wossy card, because I can see myself putting 1 or 2 copies in every Gardevoir deck. I can see myself playing this because, you know what? It hits a good weakness, it's got a good attack, and a useful GX attack. I like it a lot, and if nothing else, we're actually getting this Mimikyu, and that makes me delighted. But I tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to hear from you guys. So let me know what you think about this Mimikyu in the comment section. Go nuts. Be nice. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at @TheWossy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all of that, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. But by far the most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.